I was buttering toast when the plumber told me to grab my things and get out of the house. His tone wasn't loud, just certain. "Ma'am," he said, setting his wrench beside my sugar bowl. "Take your purse and leave. Right now. Don't tell your children." The kettle clicked off behind me, steam curling across the window. For a second I thought it was a joke. "Excuse me?" I laughed, though my voice sounded wrong. "You must be mistaken." He wasn't. "Please," he said softly, eyes flicking toward the basement door. "I need to show you something." Manuel had come to fix a small leak under the upstairs bathroom, something my son Michael swore was nothing urgent. He was a sturdy man in a faded shirt, the kind who knew pipes the way some men know prayer. But the look in his eyes, steady, urgent, wasn't about plumbing. I followed him down the narrow stairs, the boards creaking beneath my slippers. The air grew damp, cold. The basement light flickered to life, spilling over boxes labeled Christmas, taxes, Dad's tools. My late husband's handwriting curled across each one. "Over here," Manuel whispered. He knelt by the furnace, pushing aside a stack of paint cans. "You see that?" At first, I didn't. Then my eyes caught it, a thin, transparent tube running along the joist, vanishing into a small metal box wired to a timer outlet. A faint hum vibrated the air. The smell, sweet, chemical, wrong, clung to the back of my throat. "What is it?" I asked. Manuel's jaw tightened. "It feeds into your bedroom vent," he said. "Someone rigged it to release gas, or vapor, at set hours. You sleep right above this line, don't you?" For a moment, the world blurred. My knees felt watery, the way they did when the doctor told me my husband's cancer was terminal. "You mean—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I stepped back, covering my mouth. "That can't be right," I whispered. "My son, he's a construction foreman. He knows better. Did he install this?" "He and his crew did the bathroom renovation," I said slowly. "He said it would make the air flow better." Manuel stared at the tubing again, tracing it with the beam of his flashlight. "Then he knows exactly what this is." My heartbeat filled my ears. I remembered the weeks after my husband's funeral, when Michael moved back home, saying he didn't want me rattling around this big place alone. Linda came soon after her divorce, quiet, brittle. I thought I was lucky to have my children close again. But lately, things had changed. Michael's smiles came strained, his temper short. Linda stopped joining me for tea, claiming headaches, locking herself in her room for hours. The house had grown silent, heavy. I thought it was grief. I thought we were all just learning to live differently. Manuel wiped his hands on a rag. "You need to leave right now," he said. "I'll call someone I know at the police department, but they'll need proof. I can document this setup, but you can't stay here tonight." My mind raced. Where would I go? What would I say to my children if they came home and found me gone? "They'll worry," I said weakly. "Michael will wonder. If he's innocent—" Manuel interrupted. "He'll be glad you're safe." "If he isn't," he didn't finish. The silence between us grew thick. Upstairs I heard the refrigerator motor hum, a sound so ordinary it felt obscene. "I'll get my purse," I said. I climbed the stairs, my hand trembling on the rail. Every photo along the hallway seemed to watch me: the family trip to Lake Erie, Michael in his cap and gown, Linda holding her newborn niece. I touched the frame of my husband's picture and whispered, "Help me." In the kitchen, sunlight streamed across the table, catching the crumbs from my untouched breakfast. My butter knife lay where I'd dropped it earlier, the blade glinting beside the marmalade jar. The scene was so normal it broke my heart. I reached for my purse, but a wave of dizziness stopped me. The air felt thick, cloying. I stared at the vent above the pantry door, the one Michael insisted on replacing during the renovation. It was humming faintly. I took a step closer, sniffed, and caught that same sweet, metallic odor. Manuel's voice rose from the basement. "Mrs. Smith, are you okay?" I pressed a hand to my chest. "Coming," I called, forcing calm into my tone. My pulse galloped beneath my skin. When I returned to the basement door, Manuel was photographing the setup with his phone. "Don't touch anything," he said. "We'll need fingerprints intact. I've already turned the timer off, but the system's been running for days, maybe weeks." I swayed, gripping the banister. Weeks? He nodded grimly. Whatever's being released, it's slow, subtle. Probably meant to make you sick gradually. You'd think it was age, stress, medication. You wouldn't suspect a thing. My legs nearly gave out. I sat on the bottom step, staring at the gray concrete floor. I thought of the nights I'd woken dizzy, blaming low blood sugar. The afternoons when my vision blurred, chalking it up to fatigue. The strange fog that hung in my room some mornings. A sob slipped out before I could stop it. Why? I whispered. Why would they? Manuel crouched beside me. You don't have to understand that right now, he said gently. You just have to survive it. He helped me to my feet. Get in your car, go somewhere safe. I'll make the call. When the police come, they'll handle the rest. I wanted to argue, to say I couldn't just leave, but one look at the tube snaking up toward my bedroom vent silenced me. I went to grab my coat from the hook by the back door. Outside, the air felt clean, startling. The dogwood by the fence shimmered white in the morning Sunday. For a fleeting second, I thought about turning back, just to look at the house again. But something inside me, something older than fear, said don't. I started the car, hands shaking. The engine's rumble sounded louder than usual. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught sight of the living room window, curtains drawn. Behind that glass was every photo, every memory, every lie. The question rose in me like a tide, sharp and unanswerable. How could my own family do this? I used to think a good mother never counted what she gave. When my husband died, I told myself that love wasn't measured in dollars or hours, only in presence. I repeated that like a prayer, especially on nights when the house echoed with silence and I had to remind myself that my children would come home eventually. And they did, though not in the way I expected. Michael arrived first, carrying 2 duffel bags and a story about losing his foreman contract. Just until things even out, Mom, he said. His hugs were still warm then, the kind that pressed long enough to reassure me he hadn't hardened entirely. I gave him the spare room, cooked his favorite meals, and slipped grocery cash into his jacket. Linda came a few months later, suitcase in hand, face streaked with mascara. Her husband had found someone else, younger, quieter, she said. I made up the attic room with the floral quilt she'd always loved. I told her she could stay as long as she needed. You're home now, I said, and believed it. Those first weeks were noisy again, coffee cups clinking, the smell of bacon and laughter at breakfast. The house almost felt alive. I thought it was healing us, that grief had turned a corner. I couldn't have known it was simply circling back, disguised as comfort. I still worked part-time at the library then, shelving returns, humming along to the radio. Every Friday I'd bring home small treats, lemon yogurt for Linda, a 6-pack of root beer for Michael. On Sundays I'd bake cinnamon rolls. The smell winding through the house like memory itself. They'd sit at the table scrolling their phones, and for a few minutes I could pretend we were still a family. Money was tight, but I managed. After my husband's funeral, I'd paid off the last of the medical bills and refinanced the mortgage so neither child would have to worry when I'm gone. It was supposed to be my gift, the house, the safety net, the quiet certainty that they'd always have somewhere to land. Michael called me his little investor when I helped him with his business loan. You're saving the family name, Mom, he said, kissing my cheek. The next week, I wrote him a check for $12,000. When Linda needed to cover legal fees for her divorce, I withdrew another $10,000 from my savings. I'll pay you back, she promised, eyes soft and shiny. I told her she didn't need to. I told both of them they didn't. I wanted to believe I was buying peace, not dependence. The days blurred into quiet routines. Michael fixed things that weren't broken, new light fixtures, new locks, a new thermostat he said would help with efficiency. I liked the hum of tools, the smell of sawdust. It made the house feel cared for. Linda helped in smaller ways, folding laundry, arranging flowers, saying she'd handle the online bills. I was grateful. I told my friends from church that my children had come back to take care of me. But small changes crept in, the kind that seem harmless until you line them up. Michael started locking the basement, saying his tools were down there and some things could be dangerous. Linda began eating meals alone, tray in her room, door shut. They laughed less, whispered more. I'd walk into the living room and find them mid-conversation, stopping like I'd interrupted a meeting. Once, I heard Michael say, "She won't notice," before footsteps scattered down the hall. I noticed. I just didn't want to admit it. The first dizzy spell came one Sunday afternoon. I was frosting a cake for Linda's birthday when the room swayed. My vision pinched inward, edges darkening. I sat, breathing slow until it passed. When I told Michael, he frowned like a doctor. "You're not eating enough," he said, "and you keep the window open too much. Could be allergies." I nodded, embarrassed for worrying him. A week later, my throat started burning at night. I'd wake coughing, eyes watering, my pillowcase damp. The next morning, Linda brewed tea and pressed it into my hands. "Try to rest, Mom," she said. Her tone carried kindness, but her eyes were elsewhere. I blamed grief again. I told myself this was how widowhood worked, aches that no doctor could fix. Then there were the papers. One evening, I found a stack of envelopes on the counter, my name on them in Michael's handwriting. "Just some updates for the house insurance," he said. I skimmed the first page and saw something strange, his name listed under primary beneficiary. When I looked up, he was watching me too closely. "Sign there," he said lightly, "just in case something happens, you know?" Something in me balked. I tucked the pen away and said I'd read it later. He shrugged, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. The next day, the papers were gone. That night, I sat by my bedroom window and watched the shadows of my children move through the house. They spoke softly, their voices blending with the hum of the new vent Michael had installed. The smell from it was faintly sweet, almost pleasant. I told myself it was the new paint. I still remember the night I caught them whispering on the porch. "She'll never move," Linda said. "She doesn't have to," Michael answered. "It'll happen on its own." The porch light flickered, and they fell silent. I told myself they were talking about the market, about my hesitation to sell the house, anything but what it sounded like. Mothers do that, we edit what we hear to make the story bearable. In the morning, Michael cooked breakfast, cheerful again. "I'm sorry about last night," he said, though I hadn't mentioned it. "You've been tense lately, we all have. Maybe see a doctor, huh?" I smiled weakly and said yes. The following week, Manuel came to fix the bathroom leak. I remember apologizing for the mess, chatting about the weather, offering him coffee in my blue cornflower mug. He was polite, steady, unhurried. I liked that. He reminded me of my husband, practical, gentle, kind. When he asked who'd done the recent work, I said proudly, "My son." It wasn't until he turned pale and told me to leave that I realized pride can be blinding. Now, when I think of that morning, I replay the years that led there, the loans, the trust, the open doors. I see how every sacrifice I made became a step toward that basement. I wanted to give my children a home so they'd never feel lost. I never imagined it would become the place they'd try to erase me. It began with small things, the kind you dismiss because it's easier to believe you're being forgetful than betrayed. The first time was the mail. A letter from the bank arrived addressed to Estate of Margaret Smith. My heart stuttered. I was still alive, still breathing. When I asked Michael, he said it was just a clerical thing, something that happened when he updated my account online. He smiled, poured me coffee, and the moment passed. Then came the thermostat. Michael said he'd upgraded it to a smart system, connected to an app so he could control the temperature remotely. "Easier for you, Mom," he said. "You won't have to get up in the night." But sometimes I'd wake drenched in sweat, the air thick and warm. Other nights, the vent would hiss cold air that smelled faintly metallic. I started keeping a sweater by the bed, and an unease I couldn't name began to settle into my bones. Linda had grown quieter, too. After her divorce, she'd been fragile but affectionate, always bringing me tea, asking about my sleep. Now she drifted through the house like a ghost, her phone clutched close, her eyes avoiding mine. I caught her once at my bedroom door, fumbling with her keychain. She said she was checking the curtains for mildew. I wanted to believe her. My days grew slower, foggier. I'd forget what I was saying mid-sentence. My hands shook when I poured tea. I blamed age, stress, the weather, anything but malice. But Manuel's discovery haunted me. I could still see the tube, the timer, the way it pulsed with quiet purpose. He'd told me not to go back inside until the police came, yet I had. Because it was my home, because I couldn't believe my children could harm me. The morning after, I tried to act normal. I made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee, and waited for them to come downstairs. Michael appeared first, tie loose, jaw tight. Linda followed, eyes puffy, carrying her tablet. "Morning," I said softly. "Morning," they echoed, but neither looked at me. Michael glanced toward the basement door, where the padlock hung open from Manuel's visit. "Why'd you unlock this, Mom?" "Oh," I said, my voice steadying itself. "The plumber needed access." He froze mid-motion. "What plumber?" I swallowed. "Manuel. You know, from Harrison and Co. He fixed the leak." His eyes narrowed. "I told you I'd handle that." Linda's spoon clinked against her bowl. "Did he finish?" she asked lightly. Too lightly. I nodded. He was very thorough. Michael's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. He grabbed his coffee and left early. The screen door banged hard enough to rattle the window. After he left, Linda lingered. She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. "You shouldn't let strangers in, Mom," she murmured. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "People take advantage." That afternoon, I found my bedroom window latched shut, though I always left it open a crack. The air inside was heavy again, syrupy. I opened it wide, and a strange fear bloomed in me. What if Manuel hadn't found everything? What if something still ran, silent and unseen? When night fell, I turned off the vent and shut my door tight. I slept with a flashlight and my phone under my pillow. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the faint hiss of air returning. I crept to the register, pressed my hand over it. Warm. The smell, faint, sweet, wrong, was back. The next morning, Michael announced he'd checked the system. He said Manuel tampered with things he shouldn't have. I asked what he meant, and he smiled. "Don't worry, Mom. I fixed it." That smile chilled me more than any gas could. The days blurred again. I began writing everything down: dates, times, smells, headaches. I hid the notebook inside an old recipe binder. I wrote in small, neat letters like my husband used to. It gave me a sense of control. Then came the call from my bank. A polite voice confirmed that the transfer had gone through. I froze. "What transfer?" The clerk hesitated. "The funds from your savings to the joint household account under Michael Smith." My throat went dry. "There must be a mistake," I said. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That evening, when Michael came home, I asked him, "Did you move money from my account?" He didn't even blink. "You said I could manage the bills, remember? I never—" "Mom," he cut in sharply, "you're tired. You forget things." Linda appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "He's helping you. Why do you make it sound like he's stealing?" "I didn't." Michael stood. "We're just trying to make life easier for you. You should rest more, Mom." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. The people I had trusted most now spoke to me like I was a stranger trespassing in my own life. That night, I called Manuel. I whispered into the phone so softly that I could barely hear myself. "I think they know you found something." He told me to keep the vents shut and meet him the next morning. "Don't eat or drink anything they give you," he said quietly. "And if anything feels off, call me immediately." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, listening to the house breathe, the faint hum from the vent, the floor creaks above, the refrigerator's low moan. I looked at the family photo on my nightstand. Michael, 10 years old, covered in mud from his first soccer game. Linda, holding a stray kitten, both smiling. They'd once been my whole reason for living. Now, they were the reason I couldn't sleep. The following morning, Manuel's van didn't appear at 8 as planned. My phone buzzed an unknown number. A man's voice said, "Mrs. Smith, Manuel asked me to pick something up for him. Mind if I come by?" The tone was too slick, too casual. I hung up and locked every door in the house. By evening, the air felt thick again. I sat at the kitchen table, forcing myself to breathe evenly, the notebook open before me. I wrote a single line: "Something in this house is killing me, and it wears the faces I love." Then I closed the book, hid it in the flour tin, and whispered to the empty room, "Please let me be wrong. But deep down, I already knew I wasn't. The tension inside my house began to feel like weather, thick, unspoken, and impossible to escape. Even when the windows were open, I couldn't breathe right. Every sound made me flinch. The creak of a floorboard, the click of the basement door locking, the faint hum from behind the walls. Michael and Linda had turned my home into a stage, and I was their unwilling audience. They spoke to each other in fragments, in looks that ended when I entered the room. If I lingered too long, Linda would sigh loudly, and Michael would clear his throat, small signals that I wasn't welcome. One morning, Michael announced that he'd installed new safety measures. A hallway camera, he said, for security. But its angle faced only one direction, straight toward my bedroom door. Just so we can check on you if you fall, he explained. The red light blinked like a tiny heartbeat. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. Linda took over the kitchen. She labeled jars, rearranged the pantry, and told me not to strain myself. I'd reach for the kettle, and she'd intercept. "I've got it, Mom," she'd say, smiling too wide. She began preparing all my meals, soups, teas, stews that tasted faintly wrong, faintly bitter. I stopped finishing them. The headaches came back stronger. A dull pulse behind my eyes that turned the daylight harsh. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, staring at the vent above the dresser, watching it breathe. Some nights, I'd close it with tape, but by morning, it would be open again. Manuel called every few days from different numbers. He was careful, his voice low. "Stay alert," he said. "I've given the police the photos. They're reviewing them. Don't confront anyone yet." He wanted me to move out, but where would I go? This was my husband's house, my life built brick by brick from our 30 years together. I wasn't ready to abandon it to strangers or to my own children. Then came Sunday dinner, the night I finally understood just how far gone they were. Michael had invited one of his coworkers, a young man with oil-stained hands and nervous laughter. The table was set neatly, candlelight flickering off the polished forks. Linda wore perfume heavy as syrup. "We should celebrate," she said. "Mom's been feeling better." I smiled politely, though my stomach churned. The smell from the vent above the dining table was stronger than ever. I felt it in my throat, sweet, cloying, metallic. Halfway through the meal, my head began to spin. The room tilted. Michael reached for my glass. "Drink some water, Mom." I stared at him. The glass trembled in his hand. "No, thank you," I said quietly. His smile froze. "Don't be stubborn." I pushed my plate away, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Michael, I'd like to talk to you about the basement." The air changed instantly. His fork clattered against the plate. "What about it?" "I found the vent box," I said. The plumber showed me. Linda's face went white, then pink. "What plumber?" she snapped. "Manuel," I said. "He's filed a report." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then, Michael laughed a single hard sound. "Mom, that guy's lying. He's trying to scam you." "Jesus!" He shoved his chair back, standing. "You let a stranger into our house? You could have been robbed." His coworker looked down at his plate, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "I'm not crazy," I said softly. "I know what I saw." Michael slammed his palm on the table. The glasses rattled. "You're confused. You've been confused for months." Linda rose, putting a hand on his arm. "Please, Michael, she's not well." Their pity felt colder than their anger. I stood too, though my legs wobbled. "If I'm so confused," I said, "why is my signature on papers I never signed? Why is my money gone?" Michael's face twisted. "You're imagining things." But I'd seen the truth flicker in his eyes, panic, sharp and real. He grabbed the stack of documents from the counter and thrust them toward me. "You signed these," he barked. "Don't you remember?" I refused to take them. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "No, Michael. I remember everything that matters. And I remember that your father would be ashamed." For a second, he looked stunned, then furious. He swept the papers off the table. "You're not going to ruin this family," he shouted. "You've done enough." Linda flinched, tears welling. "Stop it, please." I could barely breathe. The air was too thick, too sweet. The edges of the room pulsed. I stumbled toward the door, gripping the wall. "Mom, sit down," Michael said, stepping toward me. I shook my head. No. Something in me broke open. Years of obedience, of gentle silence, of telling myself to be grateful, it all snapped. "You will not tell me to sit in my own house." The words came out stronger than I expected, sharp enough to slice through the air. Linda gasped. Michael froze. The next thing I remember is the world blurring, the sound of a chair tipping, a hand on my shoulder, then darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the living room couch, a blanket tucked around me. The lights were dim. I heard their voices in the kitchen. "She's getting worse," Linda whispered. "Good," Michael said. "The sooner, the better." I held my breath until my ribs ached. My son's voice, steady, practical, sounded the same as when he discussed building permits or supply costs. Only now, the project was me. I waited until their footsteps faded, then reached for my phone. My fingers shook as I typed a message to Manuel. "I think they're planning something. Please hurry." The send icon spun. No signal. Michael must have changed the Wi-Fi password again. I stared into the darkness until the first light of morning crept across the curtains. Somewhere deep inside, a realization settled like a stone. My children weren't just dangerous, they were confident. They believed I was too weak, too old, too trusting to fight back. But they were wrong. That morning, sunlight felt foreign in my kitchen, sharp and judgmental, exposing everything I'd refused to see. The breakfast table was set neatly, as if last night's argument hadn't happened. Linda poured orange juice, her hands too careful. Michael sat across from me, scrolling his phone, his jaw tight. "Sleep okay?" he asked without looking up. "Not much," I said. He nodded, still reading. "You should take your pills. They'll help." "I haven't been prescribed anything." His eyes finally met mine. "I left a new bottle by your nightstand. It's a mild sedative. Doc Graham said it might help with your nerves." "I haven't seen Dr. Graham in months." He smiled, small and cold. "He gave them to me directly." I stared at him, at the blue plastic bottle that wasn't mine. Something inside me went very still. "I'll pass," I said. "Suit yourself," he muttered, pocketing his phone. "But if you keep forgetting things, people might think you need supervision." Linda laughed softly, pretending to sip her juice. The sound felt rehearsed. Later that day, I found the back door key missing from its hook. The basement padlock was new again. My car, usually parked by the hedge, had been moved closer to the house. My independence was being packed away piece by piece, so subtly it might have looked like care. By evening, my head ached. The air felt thick. I cracked a window and sat in my husband's old recliner, the one he used to nap in after dinner. It still smelled faintly of aftershave and wood smoke. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe. The hum from the vents grew louder. I thought about Manuel's voice on the phone, calm, firm. "Stay awake. Don't eat. Don't trust the air." At 7, Michael called from the hall, "Dinner's ready." I didn't move. He appeared in the doorway, his expression patient, almost kind. "Come on, Mom. We made your favorite chicken stew." "I'm not hungry." He tilted his head. "You should eat. You'll get weak." I said no. A long silence. Then he shrugged and stepped closer. "You know, we've been trying to help you, but you make it so hard." The way he said it, quiet, measured, was worse than shouting. I stood, gripping the armrest. "Help me?" "You've lied to me, stolen from me." He interrupted softly. "Don't be dramatic." Linda appeared behind him, wringing a dish towel. "Please, Michael," she whispered. "Not now." But he kept coming, his voice low and steady, the way he used to soothe me when my husband was sick. "You've been confused, Mom. It happens at your age. You don't want to embarrass yourself, do you? All these stories about vents and poison, people will think you've lost it." "I know what I saw." He sighed. "You saw what someone wanted you to see. That plumber filled your head with nonsense. He's probably after your money. People like him prey on the lonely." Something in me snapped. "I am not lonely," I said, my voice rising. "I was lonely before you came back. Now I'm afraid." His jaw tightened. "Afraid of your own children?" I met his eyes. "Yes." The silence that followed was colder than winter. Linda stepped forward. "Michael, stop." But he didn't. He leaned closer until I could smell his cologne, sharp and chemical. "If you keep this up," he said softly, "we'll have to get you evaluated, maybe even admitted. That's what happens when people can't tell fantasy from reality." I felt dizzy again, my pulse hammering in my throat. He turned and walked away, whistling as if nothing had happened. I locked myself in my room that night. I shoved a chair under the doorknob and sat on the floor with my phone clutched tight. There was no signal again. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my door. A soft knock. Linda's voice. "Mom? Can I come in?" "No. Please," she whispered. "I just want to talk." I stayed silent. After a pause, her tone changed. "You're making this worse, you know. Michael's losing patience." Her words hit me like cold rain. "Linda," I said, my voice trembling, "you're my daughter." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I don't want you to suffer." Her shadow lingered under the door for a long time before fading away. The next morning, Manuel called from a new number. "They've filed a welfare report on you," he said quickly. "Said you're delusional. Police might show up for a check. You have to stay calm. Let me handle it." "Please hurry," I whispered. "I think they're trying again." That night, Michael insisted we have dinner together as a family. I almost refused, but something told me it was safer not to provoke him. The stew simmered on the stove, the same sweet scent I'd grown to dread. He ladled it into my bowl, watching me closely. "Eat," he said. I lifted the spoon, my hand shaking, and set it down again. "Not yet. I want to say grace." His jaw twitched. "Sure. Whatever you need." I bowed my head, but my prayer wasn't words. It was a plan forming, desperate and clear. I reached for my napkin, pretending to wipe my mouth, and whispered, "I called Manuel. He knows everything." For the first time in weeks, I saw fear in his eyes. "What did you say?" "Everything," I lied. "He's coming back tonight." He stood abruptly. "Excuse me," he muttered, walking toward the basement door. I watched him disappear down the steps. The moment he was gone, I poured the stew into the sink, rinsed the bowl, and opened every window I could. My heart pounded so hard it made my vision shake. Then, Linda appeared in the doorway, pale, silent. "What did you tell him, Mom?" she asked. "Enough," I said. Her lip trembled. "You should have just trusted us." I stared at her. "Trust doesn't survive secrets, sweetheart." Behind her, I heard the faint whine of machinery from below, then a thud. She flinched. "Michael?" The noise stopped. The house went still. I realized, standing there with my daughter framed in the kitchen light, that I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done begging, done doubting, done pretending love could excuse evil. I walked past her toward the phone. "I'm calling the police," I said. She whispered, "Don't." But I already had the receiver in my hand. My voice, when it came, was calm. "My name is Margaret Smith. I believe my children are trying to kill me." Outside, a siren began to wail somewhere far away, growing louder. I sat alone in the living room after the siren faded, the air still trembling from its echo. The police never came that night. It must have been someone else's emergency. I'd stood by the window for almost an hour, waiting for flashing lights that never appeared. By midnight, exhaustion took over. I sank into my husband's recliner, the same one he'd occupied every evening of our 32 years together, and memory began to seep through the cracks of my fear. I remembered the first time I met him, Harold, at the church picnic, when he offered to fix the squeaky hinge on the lemonade stand just so he could keep talking to me. His hands were steady, sure of every tool he touched. He built our first home from the ground-up, painted walls, tiled floors, wired every outlet himself. I used to joke that the house was his second heart. After his cancer diagnosis, we sold his truck and my jewelry to cover treatment. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at the library, one cleaning offices at night while still cooking dinner and managing his medications. Michael was in college then, Linda finishing high school. They'd help when they could, but mostly they were children trying to pretend their world wasn't falling apart. I told myself that was enough. We made it 5 years past the doctor's prediction. 5 long, grateful years. When Harold died, I thought the hardest part of my life was over. I didn't understand that grief can change shape, that sometimes it wears the face of the people you love most. After the funeral, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, insurance forms, sympathy cards. I remember Michael's hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, Mom," he said softly. "I'll take care of things." He meant it then. I know he did. I let him. I signed what he asked me to sign. Power of attorney, home insurance, the refinance papers. I was too tired to read the fine print, too trusting to imagine betrayal. I thought love was a contract stronger than ink. Linda had cried for weeks after Harold's death. She came to me one night, sitting cross-legged on my bed, saying, "Promise you'll never live alone, Mom, promise." And I did. I promised because loneliness frightened me more than anything. I didn't realize that the wrong company can be lonelier than solitude itself. Years slipped by. I paid off debts, saved what I could, and watched the house grow quiet. Holidays came and went with fewer phone calls. When Linda's marriage fell apart, I told her to come home. When Michael's construction business struggled, I offered him the guest room and my savings. I didn't keep receipts. I didn't keep score. Mothers don't. But now, in the hollow silence after their betrayal, I began replaying every sacrifice like a film in reverse. I remembered the envelope I gave Michael when his truck broke down, $5,000 I'd saved for roof repairs. "You'll pay it back when you can," I'd said. He kissed my forehead. He never did. I remembered the day Linda called, crying from a payphone, saying her husband had locked her out. I drove 2 hours that night, barefoot in slippers, carrying what little cash I had in an old cookie tin. I held her while she sobbed and whispered, "You're safe now." And now that same daughter watched me choke on poisoned air and said, "You should rest more." The numbers stacked up in my head, years of double shifts, dollars siphoned, trust drained drop by drop. My love had been currency, and I'd given it until the account was empty. I opened my husband's ledger from the hall cabinet, the one where he'd written down every household expense in neat columns. My handwriting joined his on later pages. Groceries $68. Electricity $114. Loan Michael $12,000. Legal Linda $10,000. New locks $150. Security camera $200. Each line told a story. Each dollar was a prayer that had gone unanswered. I ran my fingers over his last note before he died. "For Maggie, whatever she needs." I needed courage. That was all. Outside, the night wind howled through the trees, rattling the vent cover above the window. I taped it shut again, pressing until the adhesive bit into my palms. My reflection in the glass startled me, pale, hollow-eyed, but still here, still breathing. For the first time, I saw clearly what Harold would have seen. He'd never let anyone hurt me, least of all our children. He'd taught them integrity, decency, the value of a promise. Somewhere along the way, they'd learned something else entirely, that kindness could be weaponized, that patience could be milked dry, that a mother's love was an endless well. It wasn't. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old photos. Michael at 16, holding his first toolbox, smiling proudly. Linda at 10, wearing my wedding veil, pretending to be a bride. How did we get from there to here? A thought surfaced, one Manuel had mentioned weeks earlier. "Whatever's in that device, it was designed to mimic natural causes," he'd said. "A slow buildup of toxins. By the time doctors notice, it looks like a stroke or heart failure." They hadn't just wanted my money. They wanted time enough for the world to believe I'd simply worn out. My chest tightened, not from fear but from fury. For years, I'd been invisible, the quiet widow with homemade jam and folded linens, the dependable one, the giver. They must have thought I'd fade away without a sound. But Harold hadn't built me that way. He'd built this house to last, and he'd built me the same. I pulled a notebook toward me and began to write. Every detail I could remember. The dates, the smells, the things they said, the missing money, the bank calls, the headaches. I wrote until my hand cramped, until my eyes blurred. I tucked the notebook into a plastic bag, sealed it, and slid it behind the water heater in the basement. If they took my phone or destroyed my notes, this would remain. When I came back upstairs, the house felt different, less like a tomb, more like a witness. I whispered into the empty room. You can take everything I have, but you won't take my truth. Somewhere deep inside, I felt Harold's steady hand guiding mine, the same hand that once built this home and now reminded me how to survive it. Tomorrow, I would call Manuel again. I would call the detective. I would take my story out of this house and into the light. But tonight, I would remember who I was before the lies, before the fear, before motherhood became a battlefield. I was Maggie Smith, and I had already outlived death once. I could do it again. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the floor, and for the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy. Maybe it was because I'd left the windows open all night, or maybe because I'd made a decision. I was done being afraid. I brewed coffee, strong and black, just the way Harold used to like it. The simple act of boiling water felt rebellious proof that I was still here, still capable of something ordinary. I carried the mug to the table and dialed Manuel. He answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Smith, you okay?" "Not really," I said, my voice calm. "But I'm ready." He came within the hour, parking his van 2 houses down. When I opened the door, he didn't smile. His eyes scanned the hallway, the corners of the ceiling, the blinking red light of the camera above my bedroom door. "You need to get out soon," he said. "Not yet," I told him. "Not until we have proof." He hesitated, then nodded. "Then let's finish this." We went to the basement, the same airless place where my nightmare had started. He carried a small toolkit and a camera with a long lens. The padlock was new again, thick and silver. Manuel cut it cleanly, crouched beside the vent line, and unscrewed the panel. Inside was the same plastic tubing, but now something else had been added. A metal cylinder, smaller than a soda can, connected to a timer outlet with red digital numbers blinking faintly. He photographed it from every angle, zooming in on the brand name stamped along the side, Thermoair Systems Incorporated. He whispered, "That's not a household part. It's industrial, used for chemical dispersal or pest control. Someone modified it." He opened the housing carefully. Inside was a small cartridge filled with crystalline residue. He swabbed it with a cotton pad, sealed it in a plastic bag. "This will test positive for toxins," he said quietly. I stared at the device, my hands shaking. "They wanted it to look like a leak," I murmured. "An accident." Manuel nodded grimly. "And they almost pulled it off." Then he pointed to a thin cable running from the timer into a small Wi-Fi adapter. "That's your remote control. Whoever installed this can trigger it from their phone." He scrolled through a diagnostics app on his tablet and showed me a connected device, ID MS Foreman 87. Michael's initials. My knees nearly gave out. Manuel steadied me, his hand firm on my arm. "You said your son worked in construction, right?" "Yes," I whispered. "He's a foreman. He would have access to all this equipment." He took one last picture, then closed the panel. "This is enough," he said. "I'll forward everything to the detective handling your case." I nodded, but something in me needed more. Proof wasn't just about catching them, it was about confronting them, about looking my children in the eye and asking why. I climbed the basement stairs in silence, each step creaking like it might betray me. When I reached the kitchen, the phone on the counter buzzed. A message from Michael. "Going to be late tonight. Don't wait up." A minute later, Linda's voice echoed from the hallway. "Mom, you up?" I turned to see her standing by the door, holding her coffee cup, hair still damp from the shower. She smiled faintly. "You look better today." "I opened the windows," I said. She nodded. "Good. Fresh air always helps." Her eyes lingered on the floor near my shoes, Manuel's muddy footprints. Was someone here? I hesitated just long enough for her smile to falter. "Mrs. Pennington dropped off cookies," I lied. "She said she missed church." Linda tilted her head. "How thoughtful." She turned toward the fridge, pretending to look for something. "Michael's been worried about you. He said you've been acting strange." "I suppose I have," I said softly. She glanced at me then, and I caught something flicker in her expression. Pity, or guilt, or maybe both. "We only want what's best for you, Mom." I smiled. "So you've said." The moment she left for her morning walk, Manuel returned from the basement carrying his camera bag. "I've sent everything to Detective Alvarez," he said. "She's going to bring a team this afternoon. You should leave before then." "I can't," I said. "Not yet." "Mrs. Smith, if I leave, they'll hide everything," I said. "I need them to see what's coming." He exhaled through his nose, reluctant but resigned. "Then I'll stay close. Text me when they're both home. We'll coordinate." By late afternoon, storm clouds had rolled in, bruising the sky. I sat in the living room, knitting absently, waiting for the sound of Michael's truck. When he finally came through the door, the smell of rain followed him. Linda trailed behind, soaked and silent. "Basement lock's busted," he said sharply. "You know anything about that?" I looked up from my knitting. "Maybe rust. Rust doesn't cut clean through steel." Linda glanced between us. "Michael, don't!" He ignored her. "Did you have someone down there again?" I set my yarn aside. "Actually, yes," the plumber came back. He froze. "Why?" "To finish what he started," I said. "He found something interesting." His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "You should know," I said evenly. "You installed it." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Mom," he said, voice syrupy, "you've really lost it." Linda stepped forward, trembling. "Michael!" "Shut up!" he hissed at her. He turned back to me. "You think you're clever? You have no idea what you've done. Do you even know what happens if you call the cops? They'll drag you through hearings, competency tests. You'll end up in assisted living." I stood, meeting his gaze. "Maybe," I said, "but you'll end up in prison." The muscles in his jaw twitched. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I reached into my sweater pocket and pulled out my phone. On the screen was a live camera feed from the basement. The device, the timer, the cable all captured clearly. Michael's face went white. "That's connected to the cloud," I said quietly. "Even if you smash it, it's already been sent to the police." He took one step toward me, then another. His voice dropped to a growl. "You stupid!" Before he could finish, red and blue lights flashed through the window. Linda gasped. Michael spun toward the sound. Tires crunched on the driveway. The door burst open, and Detective Alvarez's voice rang out. "Michael Smith, step away from your mother." For a second, he didn't move. Then he raised his hands, palms open, trembling. Linda sank to the floor, sobbing. "I didn't want this," she cried. "I just wanted her money. He said it wouldn't hurt her." The officers handcuffed them both, reading their rights as I stood frozen, my knitting unraveling in my lap. The whole scene felt distant, like a dream too vivid to believe. When they were let out into the rain, Michael looked back at me once. His eyes, once the same blue as Harold's, were hollow now. "You did this," he said. "No," I whispered. "You did." The door closed behind them, and the house fell silent except for the steady hum of the vent, still running until Manuel shut it off for good. I pressed my hand to the wall, feeling the vibration fade away, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The house was quiet after they were taken away, but it didn't feel safe. It felt emptied, hollowed out like a shell of my former life. The police had sealed the basement, marking it with yellow tape. The vents were silent now, but the air still carried the faint, bitter trace of what had been drifting through it for weeks. I moved through each room carefully, collecting pieces of myself as if I were salvaging what was left after a storm. The detective had told me to stay with a friend until the case moved forward. "We'll need statements," she said gently. "And testing will take a few days. Don't come back here alone." But I couldn't leave, not yet. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes, to stand in the ruins of what my children had turned into, and remind myself that I had survived them. That night, I didn't sleep. I made tea, I didn't drink, sat by the window watching the streetlights shimmer against the rain. Every so often, a car would pass and cast moving shadows across the living room walls. I tried to picture Michael and Linda as they were when they were little sticky fingers, skinned knees, bedtime stories about honesty and kindness. I'd built my whole world around those memories, and now I had to admit that the people in those stories no longer existed. At dawn, Manuel came back. He didn't knock, he just appeared in the kitchen doorway, his cap in his hands. "You should have called me last night," he said. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not a bother," he said softly. "You're alive. That's what matters." He set a folder on the table, photos, printed reports, his statement for the police. "Everything's documented," he said. "They can't twist the story now." I looked at the papers spread before me. The photographs of the device, the screenshots linking it to Michael's phone, the chemical analysis confirming toxicity. It was all there, black and white, undeniable. The proof that love can curdle into something lethal. I whispered. "Do you ever wonder what turns people this way?" Manuel took a long breath. "Sometimes it's greed, sometimes fear, but mostly it's because they think the person they're hurting will never fight back." His words stayed with me long after he left. By noon, I'd made up my mind. I called the real estate agent I'd used years ago. "I want to sell the house," I said. She hesitated, sensing the weight behind my voice. "Are you sure, Mrs. Smith? That's a big step." "I'm sure," I said. "This place has too many ghosts." I spent the afternoon sorting through closets and drawers, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Each item was a small reckoning. Harold's winter coat, I kept it. The china set from our wedding, I donated it. Michael's childhood baseball glove. I stared at it for a long time before placing it gently in the trash. I boxed up the photo albums too, though I couldn't bear to open them. I didn't want to see the faces smiling up at me from a time when betrayal was unthinkable. Still, I knew those images weren't lies, they were just incomplete truths, snapshots of innocence before the rot set in. When evening came, I packed a suitcase and set it by the door. But before leaving, I walked through the house one last time. In the hallway, I stopped beneath the height chart we'd penciled on the wall. Michael at 9, Linda at 7, Harold's neat handwriting marking each year. I traced the lines with my fingertip, tears finally spilling over. "You were good once," I whispered. "I'll try to remember that version of you." Downstairs, the basement door hung open, the yellow tape fluttering like a warning. I went halfway down the stairs and looked at the spot where the device had been. The air was clean now, just dust and cold concrete. I thought of the nights I'd lain upstairs, breathing poison and calling it grief. The realization hit me hard. I had mistaken danger for love because it came in familiar voices. Before leaving, I took Harold's old hammer from the workbench and tucked it into my bag not as a weapon, but as a reminder of strength. He'd built this house to protect us, and somehow, even after his death, he had. It was his sense of order, of decency, that had taught me how to endure. Outside, the sky was bruised purple and gold. Manuel was waiting by his van, arms crossed. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Somewhere by the sea," I said. "Somewhere quiet." He nodded approvingly. "Salt air's good for starting over." We loaded my suitcase into his van. As I closed the door behind me, I didn't look back. I'd spent too many years doing that, looking back, hoping the past would blink and change. The drive was silent except for the hum of the tires and the faint hiss of rain. My hands trembled in my lap, but not from fear this time, from relief, from the unfamiliar weight of freedom. Halfway down the coast road, my phone buzzed. A message from Detective Alvarez. Both suspects confessed. "You're safe now." I stared at those words until they blurred. Safe. It was such a small word, but it felt enormous. When Manuel dropped me off at a motel near the beach, he handed me a card. "My cousin runs a hardware store in Clearwater," he said. "Good people. If you need anything, call him." "Why are you helping me so much?" I asked. He shrugged. "Because someone has to. Family isn't just blood, Mrs. Smith. It's who stands beside you when everyone else walks away." After he drove off, I walked to the water. The wind whipped my hair, cold and clean, and the waves rolled in steady as breath. The horizon stretched wide and merciful. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Harold. Thank you for teaching me how to survive." When I opened them again, the sea was endless, and for the first time in a long while, so was my future. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and cold coffee. Every footstep echoed against marble floors, each sound reminding me how far from home I'd come and how much closer I was to closure. 6 weeks had passed since the arrests, and the trial was finally set to begin. Detective Alvarez met me at the entrance, her expression professional but kind. "You don't have to testify if it's too hard," she said. I do, I told her. They need to hear it from me. I sat outside the courtroom, clutching my husband's wedding ring on a chain around my neck. I'd worn it every day since the night the police took my children away. It grounded me, his steadiness, his goodness. Harold had believed in truth, even when it hurt. That was what I was here to do. Tell the truth, no matter how much it tore. When the doors opened, I walked inside and saw them, Michael and Linda, sitting at the defense table. My son wore a navy suit that didn't quite fit, his wrists pale above the cuffs where handcuffs had recently been. Linda was smaller than I remembered, her face drawn tight, eyes hollow. Neither looked up when I entered. The prosecutor, a young woman with sharp eyes, nodded at me reassuringly. "We'll start with your statement, Mrs. Smith. Just speak from the heart." When I took the stand, my hands shook slightly. The oath felt heavy on my tongue. I looked out across the courtroom and tried not to see my children, only the people who had made choices that led us all here. "I'm not here out of anger," I began. "I'm here because silence almost killed me." I described the leak, the device, the air that grew sweeter and heavier each night. I told them about Manuel, about the photographs, about how the police arrived just as my son stepped toward me. My voice broke once, but I kept going. "They didn't just want my money," I said. "They wanted my absence. They wanted the kind of death no one questions." The defense attorney stood, middle-aged and practiced. "Mrs. Smith, your children claim they were simply upgrading your ventilation system. They say the plumber misunderstood. Isn't it possible you misread their intentions?" I met his gaze squarely. If love means suffocating someone slowly, then yes, I misunderstood. A quiet murmur rippled through the room. The attorney hesitated, cleared his throat, and sat down. The prosecutor introduced the evidence: the chemical tests, the bank transfers, the messages between Michael and Linda, texts that read like confessions disguised as logistics. "Once the cycle's done, she won't feel a thing." The jury shifted uncomfortably. I didn't look at my children then. I couldn't. Manuel testified next. He explained the setup in calm, technical language, showing photos of the tubing and the timer device. His voice never wavered, though his hands tightened slightly when he mentioned my name. When he stepped down, he gave me the smallest nod, as if to say, "You made it." After closing arguments, the judge recessed for deliberation. I sat in the hallway outside, watching light filter through tall windows. It looked like dust dancing, but all I could think about was the air that used to fill my house, poisoned and invisible. 2 hours later, we were called back in. The jury filed quietly into their seats. The forewoman, a woman about my age, stood and read the verdict. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. Michael's head dropped. Linda covered her face with her hands and sobbed. For a brief moment, I almost did too, not out of sympathy, but out of sheer grief for the children I once had. The ones I'd held when they were scared of thunderstorms, who'd brought me dandelions from the yard, who'd promised they'd always take care of me. The judge sentenced them to 25 years each. It should have felt like justice. It didn't. Justice is cold. It doesn't mend what's broken. When the bailiffs led them away, Linda looked back at me, tears streaking her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think there was still something salvageable inside her, but I could only nod, unable to speak. Michael didn't look back at all. Afterward, reporters waited outside, microphones flashing, questions slicing through the air like hail. "Mrs. Smith, how does it feel to see your children convicted?" I stopped on the courthouse steps, the sun glaring white on the stone. "It doesn't feel like winning," I said quietly. "It feels like surviving." They kept asking, but I walked past them, down the long path lined with oak trees. Manuel was waiting near his van, leaning against the fender, arms folded. "You did it," he said. "I told the truth," I replied. "The rest was up to them." He offered to drive me home, but I shook my head. "I need to walk a bit." So I did. I walked through the courthouse park where parents chased laughing children, where life went on as if betrayal wasn't possible. The wind lifted my hair, clean and unscented. I thought of Harold again, how he'd said once that building something strong doesn't mean it won't break, it just means it can be rebuilt. When I finally returned to my car, I sat for a long time without starting the engine. My phone buzzed, a voicemail from Detective Alvarez. "It's over," she said simply. "You can breathe again." I rolled down the window and let the air in. It smelled of cut grass and faint rain, ordinary and alive. For the first time in months, I inhaled deeply. It didn't hurt. After the trial, I drove to the sea. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not Detective Alvarez, not Manuel, not even my friends from church who'd called to say they were praying for me. I just packed a single suitcase, took the road south, and kept driving until the air turned salty and the wind smelled like freedom. I rented a small cottage near Clearwater white walls, a sagging porch, and enough quiet to hear my own heartbeat again. The landlord was an old widow herself, kind-eyed and discreet. She handed me the keys and said, "You look like someone who needs the ocean." She was right. The first morning there, I woke to the sound of gulls instead of the hum of vents. The air was clean and sharp, and sunlight spilled across the floorboards like a blessing. I made coffee in a chipped blue mug and carried it outside to the porch. Waves glittered in the distance, folding and unfolding, tireless and patient. For a long time, I just sat and listened to the wind, to the crash of water, to the faint creak of the porch swing. It was the first silence in months that didn't frighten me. Healing came slowly, like breath after panic. At first, I couldn't stop replaying everything, the smell of the poisoned air, Michael's voice calling me confused, Linda's tears in the courtroom, but over time the memories lost their edges. They became something else, not wounds, but lessons. I filled my days with small, ordinary things: watering potted herbs, mending clothes, reading novels from the thrift shop down the street. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I'd almost lost. I began volunteering at the local library twice a week, shelving books, answering children's questions about stories. Their laughter, their small voices, it all reminded me that innocence still existed somewhere, even if I'd misplaced it for a while. Manuel called now and then to check in. "How's the sea treating you?" he'd ask. "It's honest," I'd tell him. "The waves don't pretend to love you while trying to drown you." He'd laugh softly, the kind of laugh that comes from understanding. Sometimes we'd sit in silence over the line, not needing to fill it with words. At night, I wrote. Not diaries, not confessions, just memories. I wanted to leave behind something true. I wrote about Harold, about his hands steadying a frame, about the way he'd hum while sanding wood. I wrote about the children I used to have, before greed hollowed them out. And I wrote about the day the plumber told me to run, and how that warning saved my life. One evening, I walked along the shore just before sunset. The sky was painted in streaks of coral and gold, the sea glowing like molten glass. I thought of all the things I'd lost: my home, my family, the illusion that love is always safe. Yet in their place, I'd found something quieter but stronger, the ability to stand alone without apology. A little boy was building a sandcastle nearby. His mother called for him to come wash his hands before dinner, and he looked up at her with that easy trust only children have. For a fleeting second, I envied her the years ahead. She still had to believe love would never turn cruel. Then I smiled, realizing I'd once been that mother, and maybe that was enough. Later that night, I sat on the porch again, the sea murmuring like an old friend. I lit a single candle and placed it by the railing, its flame swaying gently in the breeze. I thought about what Detective Alvarez had told me after the verdict. "You're a survivor, Mrs. Smith. That's not weakness, that's grace." Maybe she was right. Survival isn't about escaping death, it's about choosing life, again and again, even when it hurts to. Before going inside, I whispered to the wind, "I forgive you." Unsure if I meant my children, the house, or myself. Maybe all of it. Maybe forgiveness isn't a gift we give others, it's the door we open so we can finally leave. Inside, the small radio played an old jazz tune Harold used to love. I poured a glass of wine and watched the candle flicker through the window. The waves outside rolled endlessly, indifferent and beautiful. For the first time since the nightmare began, I realized I didn't need anyone to tell me I was safe. I could feel it in the air, in my lungs, in the quiet rhythm of my own heart. I raised the glass. Not to the past, but to the woman who had walked through it and come out whole. Family, I said softly, isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when you're drowning and pulls you into the light. Then I blew out the candle, letting the darkness fill the room, calm and unthreatening. And for the first time in a very long while, I slept deeply, without fear. If this story moved you, don't leave in silence. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every word. Subscribe to stay with me for more stories like this. Stories about truth, betrayal, and the quiet strength that saves us in the end. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Sometimes, a story can be the light someone's been waiting for.